I guarantee you that every single beginner or enthusiast at bonsai has found a problem with this. I guarantee that every single one of you have tried to resolve it and made horrendous mistakes. Today I'm going to tell you exactly what that problem is and why I consider it the #1 biggest problem that most beginners face when they start doing bonsai. In fact, start nothing. I still face the problem. And the reason why I've gone for this is not because it's clickbait, but because I got a comment from someone in relation to a video I did back on this olive way back in 2022, 2023. If it had just been one comment, I probably wouldn't have made a deal about it and think there's an issue out there. But I also got it for this really developing field maple. Again, for those of you who remember, there's a particular thing I did to this that shocked a few of you. In fact, thinking about it, I also did it to this field elm. Even this garden-grown Escallonia caused a bit of an uproar because of what I did to it. And I have no doubt that what I eventually decide to do to this interesting silver birch will cause as much controversy. Most of it positive, but occasionally someone, well, they just dig in there because they don't like what they see. And that isn't an issue for me. But anyway, to find out what I honestly believe is the biggest #1 problem or issue that bonsai beginners face, keep watching because I've got at least 7 examples of how I overcome that. Hi, it's Xavier. Welcome to my bonsai retreat, and I think this is something special. And I'm going to say now, this is not a moan, and anyone who says stop getting upset because people write bad comments, that's not the issue here. But the comment did actually raise what I think is a really valid point, and also probably the biggest single issue with watching YouTube videos about bonsai, because this particular person, tell you what, let's show the comment now, and this isn't a name and shame. I personally prefer getting positive development hints, and lots of really good bonsai enthusiasts and professionals, whatever, will often comment in a positive way about something I've done that they think actually could be done better, different, or alternatives. And you know what? I've got absolutely no problem with them. And contrary to popular belief, I have been doing this for nearly 25 years, and though I may pose questions to you during the videos, I often do that as if I'm a beginner. And it's not to be condescending, it's often just my way of helping you draw into the video. And I'll often listen for those explanations or the things that you may suggest, and sometimes I take the advice. But honest, I've normally got a very clear idea or picture of what I'm going to be doing with my trees. So anyway, you've seen the comment, and no, honestly, it's not a go or a dig at this person. Do you know what? I tell you what, some of the things I've done, I think I'd struggle to do again looking back. But you know what? Bonsai is full of mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you never learn and you never get better. In fact, that's probably my second biggest thing about bonsai and bonsai for beginners. Anyway, going back to the first thing, look, it's obvious. These olives were first introduced to the channel in 2022 when I did a big repot on them. And then subsequently in 2023 I did a video where, well, basically I looked at them. In fact, let's have a quick look just to remind you. This first tree, a lot of suckers have been growing, so before we can do anything, let's remove the suckers. Olive number 2 is a little bit more difficult, but again, I had to stop myself from trying to think of the secondary structure and things like that. I'm looking at primary. Okay, here we go, olive number 3. This one, unlike the others, has got an incredible root spread on it. And as you can see from that video, though I had 3, well, to be fair, they were each 50 pounds, these olives, and though they were looking okay, and they had a basic structure, and many people, including my daughters and sons, said, "Pa, they're absolutely brilliant, I don't know why you want to cut them up." You know that when I do pruning, one of the first things I hammer home is you look at the base, you look at the trunk, and then you look at the branches and you remove anything that's wrong or is never going to be sustainable in the long term. And that, I believe, is probably the hardest and most difficult skill to pick up in general terms for bonsai. One, because we've never really learnt about the characteristics and the responses of our trees. And two, because we don't have the experience or the confidence to make really quite big cuts with that knowledge that it's going to come through in the end. But you know, I reckon all of us can look in our collections and go, oh, I wish I'd cut back a lot earlier and avoided trying to make a bonsai out of something that was never going to make a bonsai. And the olives were probably the first time where I had to look at something and go, I've got branches, but I really don't think I can make a bonsai from them. What do I do next? Well, that's when you come to making the tough, hard decisions, and you remove everything that to you looks wrong. And that probably brings up the third biggest issue. Bonsai is about perspective. It's personal. What looks wrong to me may not look wrong to you, and vice versa. And why is it a problem on YouTube? Well, YouTube, the best one in the world, is two-dimensional. I can't give you that full 3D experience. I can do close-ups, I can do all sorts of things. So ultimately I accept that sometimes you look at what I'm doing and you can't see it the same way. So there's some issues, but what are we going to do about it? Well, truthfully, from my perspective, the first thing we have to be able to do is to look at whatever material we've got in front of us and go, is this going to be a big bonsai? And if it's going to be a big bonsai, how thick does the trunk need to be? There's lots of technicalities about it, but understanding where our branches should be in a tree. So in a tree this height, which is a foot high, I'll have one about a third up, another one about 2/3 up, and then have the apex going from there. Somewhere roughly in those sort of proportions. And the thickness of the branches should reflect that versus the thickness of the trunk. And again, I'm not going to go into detail, I've done videos about that. But sometimes what you first get, and actually let's just remind ourselves what we first had with this.
So what we really need to do to appreciate this properly is look down there, and it's that. If we spin that around, you see that trunk movement? There is incredible.
Not only did I go very hard on the roots, which drew some comments for sure, I also went extremely hard on the actual branches and what I was considering. And ultimately, I really decided I wanted a stub there, and I wanted this, and I was going to grow the rest after that. Tony, I'm doing it now. The tree's in there. Understanding field maple, I knew they budded easily, and I knew I was likely to get a lot of growth so long it remained healthy. And the only single thing I did that could have been dangerous was the amount of roots I took off and the amount of top growth I took off at the same time. But again, my confidence with field maple meant I didn't see that as a problem. And I think if you look at it now, it's got some pruning that needs to be doing, but that has got a much more balanced feel as what's going to be a show-in tree. But to do it, I had to go hard, and I had to take off a lot of branches and a lot of roots. Anything that's wrong, remove. And equally, I got the same comments when I took this as a nursery plant to bonsai project, and there's a playlist all about this Fuji cherry. Absolutely incredible flowers, mid to late February. And this is actually probably the first time in 2 or 3 years where it started to actually look like the bonsai that I imagined when I first did the work. Because, well, hey, let's go and have a look at what it looked like before I got these to it. And again, you might say you took an incredible 3-foot shrub, which probably should have been planted in the garden, to try and make this. Well, hopefully you're starting to see why that process happened. And again, what I say is it needs strong action early on. If I hadn't removed, cut things down, and started basically from that bare trunk, I was never ever going to be able to produce this. And I think this is going to be an absolute winner. But you know what? It isn't difficult to do, because you could do it straight away. Because I'm the first one to say, oh, I wish I'd learnt to do this when I first started the hobby. Because all you need to do is look at your tree and go, that branch is never going to work. And I'm not just going to leave it with those few examples. I showed you this Escallonia. This was growing in my garden for a couple of years, up until 2022 when I was looking for material for the channel, and I dug it up, and do you know what? Let's go and have a quick look and a reminder to see exactly what it was I was faced with to begin with. So there you go, I basically stripped it right back down to the main trunk with one area coming out and said to you, I'm going to grow everything else after that, because everything else was wrong with it if it was ever going to become a bonsai. And it's been pruned right back several times, but each time I've managed to develop a couple more branches. And again, this one was only pruned quite heavily 2 months ago. And I think someone then said they were be interested to know how it was going to respond. Well, do you know what? That's how it's responded. It's giving me more and more. But the thing with trees like this, and certainly plants that are vigorous, is that if you don't grab them early, your maples, your elms, your Escallonia, then you're going to run into loads and loads of problems with conflicting branches, with branches that are going the wrong direction, or indeed with branches getting so thick that you find yourself trying to make a design from something that's already going to struggle to look like a tree or a bonsai. Now, I know the argument is always going to be the same from a lot of people. I like to do it the naturalistic way. I like it to look like it does in nature. And do you know what? That's great. This is an art form, whatever. But this isn't what I would call formalized bonsai. All I'm trying to do is create structure, space, and dare I say it, Ryan Neal, sustainability, so that when branches grow, they grow into areas that they can occupy without getting clogged up or causing problems and mayhem. How do you do that? You go back to the first principle and you have a look at your tree and say, are my branches in the right place? Are they the right size for the stage the tree is at now? If they're not, do I have to take major drastic action, i.e. big trunk chops, removal of lots of branches? And if my answer to that is yes, then the first thing you need to be doing, if you've got a lack of experience and knowledge, is start searching in the books and on YouTube for how the tree reacts if you do those cuts. That's why I used to watch YouTube. I wanted to watch and see the likes of Nigel Saunders, because he likes to cut things right back and build the tree from the beginning, whatever it is. And you very quickly learn and think, do you know what, if the tree's healthy, I can do that sort of work. And again, I'll bring this field elm as an example. Again, someone asked me how that was getting on, and you know, this is how it's looking now. But for those of you who remember what it looked like when I first started, none of this was here. It was a big trunk chop that I did 2 years ago, and it was basically just that stump trunk. I looked and researched. I saw that elm does respond well, does back bud readily. Key, if it's healthy. And the other thing to remember is normally the first year you do anything major, it generally sulks, it wants to recover, so never panic. But again, making these sort of decisions early on in the bonsai training will bring you back so many more rewards that you'll be glad you did it. Does that mean it always works? Well, in this instance, it's developing beautifully, and I will shortly be doing another cut. All I want to do right now is keep this growing, because I want to keep healing that. So that's fine for now. But I will say this, there was a tree I took pretty strong action with, and it didn't work. That was this tiger bark ficus, which featured in the short. I've talked about it a number of times because I ended up taking quite a big branch out of here, because what I wanted to try and do was create a balanced structure. But you know what? The one thing I was always hoping for, and because they're vigorous and if they're healthy they should do, I needed that to produce a shoot from there, or I needed, in fact what I was looking for was something from this branch or somewhere here to fill that space in, or indeed from here. It never happened. I did that action 2 years ago, and I've kept trying to justify and say, oh, I think it's working all right. But you know what? I do regret that. It was unique, it had its own particular style, it grew that way, and on top of that, it filled in a lovely big area here. And yeah, I regret it. Does that stop me doing bonsai? Does that stop me from taking decisions for big cuts because I think it's not right for the tree? No, of course not. That's just part and parcel of doing this fun hobby. Now, some of you out there, if you haven't switched, are probably turning and saying, Zav, look, what are you trying to tell me? You haven't shown me anything. You haven't shown me how to do this hard pruning. And what I'll say to you is I have. Because in the instance of that particular olive video, it was a 22-minute video. I actually spent a lot of time talking, and back in those days, those 2 years ago, I used to talk and talk and talk and talk, and I explained my justification. And that brings us on to probably the single biggest failing with watching YouTube videos. And trust me, I do it all the time still. We open it up, and someone starts to tell us, and they say, oh, I've got this tree, and you go, yeah, I want to see what you do with it. And you flick on, I know that, I know that, I know that, I know that. There's nothing wrong with that. Do you know what? It's you're consuming, you're the one who wants to get information. Unfortunately, when we flick, certainly with my videos, then you invariably miss out on all those funny bits I say, or you come back in and think, what on earth is he talking about? But you miss often the justification for decisions we make on whether we prune something right back, whether we're willing to forego a branch that could have worked, but we want to go for something better. And I think that's the thing with a lot of our YouTube consumption. We haven't got loads of time. There's so much content out there that we actually do ourselves a disservice by not sitting down and going, do you know what? I'm watching this video because I want to learn about it, and I'm going to watch it right through and listen and understand the rationale as well as seeing things happen. And to give you an example, we'll talk about this. I've got 2 apples here. This is a big crab apple that was 4 foot long. You haven't seen it before. It was horrible, 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 and I did a big chunk top here. And I let that one grow on. And all I've done is put a bit of wire to go off in that direction. I've allowed a branch to grow here. That's not going to be the long term. My major thing with this is that existing straight that I had was never going to be any good, so I chopped it right back to the lowest usable branch that was going to be realistic for the trunk thickness. So that's the first thing. I normally always apply that. What's the trunk thickness? Is it going to get any thicker? If the answer is no, then I want the next relative branch for the new leader. This side branch I will end up chopping right back, probably to here, and then grow branches from that. And I'm looking for really a bud that is probably about there. And at the end of this year I will cut that off. The next bud's going to go that way. And again, same with this one. It was a 4 foot tree. I didn't have any usable branches anywhere along the length of it. I thought about wiring it, I thought about turning it down, and in the end I realised it's still not going to be right. I looked at the thickness of the trunk and thought my first branches have to realistically be within 10 to 15 centimetres of the base. And in this case, I've got 2 that are going either side. That is going to be the future of this tree. But it takes time. I know that's 3-4 years away. And unless I do a time lapse, sometimes we all have to be a bit patient and understand what the rationale and why certain things that are happening that initially make the tree look pretty gopping. That's a good word, gopping. Anyway, I'm going to go and have me lunch, so I'll be back in a minute. Now, I suppose the real problem with this is that, yeah, sure, it's the biggest problem that faces us all. And how do we overcome it? Well, truthfully, yes, we can watch videos, yes, we can see how other people do things, we can understand the different principles and the guidelines and hopefully follow them. But you know what? If you're faced with that, normally most of us will go, I don't know where to start. And all I can do is take 2 examples. One's a whip that I just did some crazy wiring on, and another is a Italian Alder that really has just been allowed to grow unchecked and has been ignored. So this is the sort of thing that you're likely to get. Every single tree is different. That's why it's so difficult to overcome this, because there's no template we can follow. We have to use our experience, our understanding of the tree. Now, the first thing I'll say to you is that Italian Alder. First thing, if I'd never looked at it in my life, I'd do research. I'd look for videos on Italian Alder. I'd find out, does it back bud from bare wood? Does it produce lots of flushes of growth? And once I've got the answer to that, I know then how forgiving it'll be if I'm quite rough on it. Now, I know this. The second thing I look at is it healthy? When did I last repot it? Well, this got repotted think 2 years ago. I can tell it's healthy because I've got lots of long flushy growth, so that's okay, which means again it's probably got the energy in the reserves to take a little bit of hard work on it. So then I have to look at it and go, is there anything calling or crying out? And apart from it needs a trip to the bonsai doctor, no. So I've got to look and say, well, let's look at the main central trunk and see what have I actually got. I've got a branch here, a branch here, I've got this great big long bit here. So first of all, how tall is it likely to be? And that's probably the first question I ask myself. And if I know I'm not going to be planting, i.e. I want to start to be building it as a tree, well, I know that already that's the thickness. I'm not going to go down this, the thickness, the height is 6 times the thickness, otherwise the tree is going to be that high. So I'm not going to do that because this is my tree and how I apply bonsai. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it and go, okay, there's a branch here if I keep it, there's a branch here, there's a nice bit of taper that happens there. It's a shame we haven't got anything that's actually coming from that point, we need to cut that off. And then, beautiful, we've got a branch here, a branch here. Well, actually, if you look at the way that's going, up to the left, to the right, to the left, and there's a bud there. Now I've got a choice, and the first choice I can do is say, right, so it's not going to be any taller than here. So first of all, I'll go back to where I know there's a bud. If you turn around, there's a bud there. And while I'm here, let's just clear this up as well. Okay. And I'm not thinking about fronts or anything. I know that's going to be the height, but I'm actually thinking, could I remove even more? That, if you look at it, it's really nice and upward. And if I don't want to use wire, in truth, I'm probably just going to do that. Then I can already go, well, do I need this to be thicker or strengthening? Well, if I look at the thickness there, that's probably about half. So actually, I don't really need to grow much thicker. I could continue to leave it grow, because while that's growing, that will potentially at least give us some healing here. I do need to seal that. So I'm going to continue to let that leader grow out, the healing there, and healing there. So now I know that's my height. Well, I can already look at these and go, okay, well here, look and go, I've actually got a branch here that's got a division of 2. In relative size, the height that it's up the tree, I'm going to cut that back. So potentially that's going to get wired down. I've also got a lovely little branch that will come from there. If I didn't want to wire, then I could let that grow out and I would get some buds and I can continue to cut back on clip and grow. So that's that. Well, we already know then that isn't going to be much longer than that, because we're looking at branch thickness relative to its position on the branch. We'd expect the lowest one to be the thickest because it's probably the oldest branch that's grown. That is slightly thicker than that one. They're close together, but you know what? That's what it is. That's shorter. I'll probably take this one a little bit longer, and all I'll do is have a look over the top of the branch, holding it down and go, okay, we've got one to the left, one to the right, and relative to the size of that, I'd ideally want something here. And I've got that's an upward one, but if we have a look, that one there is actually coming from beneath this. So if I cut there, we can see that we're actually going to have a branch that's coming from the base. So we'll get 1, 1 and forward. Good enough for starting, that's for sure. And having established the widest point, nothing's going to go wider than this. If we look at this branch here, I don't like it, it's not a favourite of mine. So all I'm going to do is cut back to the first bud that I've got, which is that one. And realistically I like this one, but this is far too long. So all I can do really is remove it. And the only reason I'm going to remove it higher is because we may well get a back bud there. But the reality is I need something to come from a lot closer in. And in fact, let's just bite the bullet. Even that is too far out. I'm actually going to go back to what that is there for now. That can always be straightened out, or I may well get some buds from it. And with that in mind, actually, I could even potentially cut that one further back. But I think there we give ourselves 3 options. We've got 2 options plus that one there. one growing there, and then we'll let the leader grow. That in essence is trying to establish a basic tree structure based on branch thicknesses, how high they are, and looking at leader, some healing, and hopefully that would make reasonable sense. And again, I didn't study the tree before I put it on deliberately. And how many cuts? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5 pieces of material that were cut off. And already I look and think, do you know what? I think that's going to be okay. So where would the problem be? And I'll tell you exactly where the problem's going to be. Every tree has branches in different places, and how we look at it is based on our experience and knowledge level. You can only get it if you keep on practicing on trees. The biggest issue though is if you've been watching this on YouTube, I guarantee that at least 60% will either have a speed and a half or 2, or flick back and forth between the bits they know, and that's fine, as I said earlier. But the risk you get is that you miss out on the rationale as to why I took that off, took that off, took that off, and what exactly it is that I'm doing. This isn't perfect, but I think this is a good guideline or guidance on how to approach that first, at least scale-wise and proportion-wise, find yourself somewhere to start. Should we do it on that little whip first? And while I'm getting that, I'm just going to fill in those holes so I don't end up killing the tree in the meantime. I think what I will say, and it's probably another thing and an issue that can sometimes happen with YouTube, tell you what, having an RAF base nearby means we get a lot of passing stuff. But yeah, one of the things obviously is that unless I do time lapse, which takes 2 to 3 years, I've got lots of them in the pipeline, you're going to have to wait another year before you see whether the work that I did made sense and in fact worked. And I think again that can be the other frustration with YouTube. We don't get the ready answers. So although we see someone do the cuts, we're like, yeah, I've seen you do the cuts, but I haven't seen if the tree's survived. And that's often a comment we'll get, is that, yeah, have we had an update yet on this tree? Again, the other thing is if you don't watch future videos, you don't get to see that update, which is probably a great segue to say, if you haven't subscribed or hit bell notification, share, like, now's a great time to do it, because that way you'll find out whether or not I'm telling porky pies about the way to prune these and how to overcome that number one beginner problem. Now again, this is something that you'll often see myself doing or many other bonsai creators, and they whack a load of wire onto a whip, and we've all got them normally from our cuttings, these long whips, and we think, what do I do with it? And generally the actual reality is what we need to do is put it in a growing bed, let it thicken. This silver birch, you know, it should be 2, 3, 4 times thicker, because if it's that thick, then any branch or anything I grow from it has to be the proportionate size to it. I've got this great big long length, I've got these wiggly wires, and you think, why did you put so much wire on? And the truth is because I didn't know what I was going to do with it. So what I'll do now is I'll remove the wire, because it's been on there for 9 months, and all the way along here we've got massive wounds there. Do I care? Well, actually no, I don't really. And the reason I don't care is because I knew that my tree was down here, and really what I want is probably a little bud point just here. So I am just going to cut off all of that. So though I was wired out and grew all that, I always knew that was going to get cut off, because I always knew the thickness of the trunk when I started working on it was never going to get much more than an HB pencil. So all I wanted to do was to get a well set bend or movement into it, so that I can start to work on this as what's going to be a Mame silver birch. Yeah, it'll probably work out quite well, especially as I say in next year. I imagine in spring we'll get buds coming out from there. And what then happens is proportionately branches will grow on and you'll be able to work on it each year. That's the way, and believe it or not, that's the exact same technique that was applied there. The wire's on there now, and I'm proportionally growing each branch and the tree as it goes along. So there you go, there's the 2 solutions I've got there, and I hopefully have got across what the biggest problem is, and I think you're going to agree with me, I really do, and agree that the only solution is, yeah, understand the principles, understand perspective, how branches grow in respect to other ones. Make sure you understand the species and how it reacts. Make sure it's healthy, but never ever settle for a second best branch when your tree is still in development. If you've actually bought a bonsai and it's already a bonsai, then it's a different approach. Sometimes we take the trees as they are because they're so old. But when you're growing like this, you have the chance to make all the decisions, and you have the chance and the time to get it right. And right is down to you ultimately. But this tree looked nothing like this 2 years ago, and it was really hard to look and understand that I'd actually taken the right course. And certainly, if I just made a wild comment based on the fact that I chopped this so hard, or indeed if someone just saw me do that and saying, my 8-year-old could do that, and I'd tell them off, then you're not actually looking at the whole or bigger picture. Bonsai is a much bigger picture. Anyway, we're going to go to part 2 of this, because I thought that was an important message, but actually it all came in relation to my olives, or indeed, as Yella pointed out to me. In fact, let's remind ourselves exactly where this all come from and why it is I'm so excited about these wild olives.